Jake Miller had been working the night shift at Stellar Mechanics Station 7 for 3 years now, and he thought he'd seen everything. Busted hyperdrives, cracked antimatter cores, even a ship held together with what looked like duct tape and prayers. But when the emergency alarm blared at 2 a.m., announcing an incoming distress call, something felt different. He grabbed his coffee and jogged to the control room. His colleague Tony was already there, staring at the scanner with wide eyes. "Jake, you gotta see this. That ship is massive and it's falling apart." The screen showed a Valerian transport vessel limping toward the station, trailing smoke and sparks from multiple engine ports. Valorians were one of the larger alien species in the known galaxy, averaging around 12 feet tall, and their ships reflected their size. This one was at least 4 times bigger than anything Jake usually worked on. "Bay 3 is the only one big enough," Jake muttered, already mentally preparing his toolkit. "Tell them to dock there. I'll get ready." 20 minutes later, the ship crashed into the docking bay with a horrible grinding sound that made Jake wince. That landing gear was definitely shot. He watched through the observation window as the main airlock hissed open, releasing a cloud of steam and the acrid smell of burned circuitry. A Valerian matriarch stepped out, and Jake's first thought was that she looked absolutely exhausted. Her scales, which should have been a vibrant purple, looked dull and gray. But what really caught his attention were the 3 small Valerian children clinging to her legs, their eyes wide with fear. Jake rushed down to meet them. The matriarch's translator was malfunctioning, spitting out garbled words mixed with static. "Engine, critical failure. Children haven't eaten. Please help." Her voice cracked, and Jake could see she was barely holding herself together. Hey, it's okay," Jake said gently, kneeling down to be less intimidating despite still being dwarfed by the alien family. "You're safe now. Let's take care of you first, then we'll worry about the ship." The matriarch, who introduced herself as Velsera through the broken translator, looked surprised. Most mechanics she dealt with immediately started with damage assessments and price quotes, treating passengers like inconvenient cargo. Jake led them to the station's break room, which suddenly felt very small with a 12-foot-tall alien and her kids inside. He pulled out his lunch box and started dividing his sandwich into pieces for the children. They looked at their mother, who nodded permission, and then devoured the food like they hadn't eaten in days. "When did they last eat?" Jake asked quietly. Velsera's translator crackled. 2 days. Rations ran out. Spent last credits on fuel." Jake's heart sank. He pulled out his personal credit chip and handed it to Tony. "Go to the cafeteria. Get them a proper meal. Whatever they want. Put it on my account." Tony raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He'd worked with Jake long enough to know the mechanic had a soft spot for families in trouble. While the kids ate, Jake set up the break room's entertainment screen with some old Earth cartoons. The youngest child, who couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human 3-year-old, laughed at the colorful characters despite not understanding the language. Within minutes, the little one was curled up against Jake's toolbox, fast asleep. Velsera watched all of this with tears streaming down her face. "You are very kind. Most humans, most anyone, they don't care about passengers. Just want money fast, fix quick, leave quick." "Your kids were scared," Jake said simply. "Nobody should have to be scared like that. Now, let me go look at your ship and see what we're dealing with." He grabbed his diagnostic scanner and headed into the docking bay. The moment he stepped inside the Valerian vessel, he knew this was going to be bad. Really bad. The main corridor sparked with exposed wiring, the gravity plating flickered on and off, and the entire ship groaned like it was in pain. Jake made his way to the engine room, and what he found there made his blood run cold. The antimatter containment field had microfractures running through it like a spider web. One wrong move, one tiny bit more stress, and the entire thing could have exploded, vaporizing the ship and everyone on it. The hyperdrive coupling was completely burned out, melted into a solid lump of useless metal. But it got worse. As he crawled through the access tunnels, his scanner picked up stress fractures in the hull itself. These weren't new. They'd been growing for months, maybe years, patched over and ignored because proper repairs cost too much. If Velsera had tried to jump to hyperspace with the hull in this condition, the ship would have torn itself apart the moment they entered the hyperspace corridor. Jake sat back against the bulkhead and did some mental math. This was a minimum 48-hour job, probably longer. He'd need new antimatter containment modules, a complete hyperdrive replacement, hull repair nanites, structural reinforcement beams, and about a dozen other major components. He was looking at 30,000 credits in parts alone, and that wasn't counting labor. He crawled back out and found Velsera in the break room, watching her children sleep peacefully for the first time in who knows how long. "How bad is it?" she whispered, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Jake hesitated. He could see the fear in her eyes, the desperate hope fighting against crushing reality. "It's extensive. The containment field is fractured, hyperdrive is toast, and your hull has stress fractures that could have killed you all if you jumped to hyperspace." Velsera's shoulders sagged. "How much?" "Honestly? 30,000 for parts, probably another 20 for labor at standard rates." She closed her eyes. "I have, maybe 3,000 credits. That's all. Everything else went too." She trailed off, switching to her native language in distress. Jake watched her 3 kids sleeping peacefully, full bellies for the first time in days, finally feeling safe. He thought about his own family lost years ago in a colony collapse. He thought about why he became a mechanic in the first place, the promise he'd made to himself that he'd keep people safe, keep families together. "Here's what we're going to do," Jake said firmly. "I'm going to fix your ship. All of it. Properly. And we'll figure out the payment afterward." Velsera stared at him like he'd just spoken in an alien language she'd never heard before. "You would trust me? You don't know me. I could leave and never pay." Jake smiled. "Your kids are sleeping in my break room, full and happy for the first time in days. Yeah, I trust you. Now get some rest. This is going to take a couple of days and you look like you need sleep as much as your ship needs repairs." Jake spent the next 2 days practically living inside Velsera's ship. He'd worked on plenty of alien vessels before, but Valerian engineering was something else entirely. Everything was built to a scale that made him feel like a kid climbing around in his dad's workshop. The wrench he needed for the antimatter bolts was so heavy he had to use both hands. Around hour 6 of the first day, Velsera found him wedged into a maintenance shaft, rewiring the power distribution network. She'd brought him coffee, somehow figuring out how to use the human-sized machine in the break room. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I can find another way. Sell the ship for scrap maybe." Jake paused his work and looked down at her. Even sitting on a crossbeam 20 feet up, she was almost at eye level with him. "And then what? How do you get your kids somewhere safe? How do you make a living?" She didn't have an answer. "Besides," Jake continued, returning to the wiring, "I'm already elbow deep in your electrical system. Too late to back out now." Over the hours that followed, they talked. Really talked. Velsera told him about her late husband, Keth Moore, who died when a shipping company cut corners on maintenance and his cargo haulers suffered catastrophic engine failure. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "After he died, I got the insurance payout and bought this ship," she explained, sitting on the deck plating while Jake worked overhead. "I thought I could do independent cargo runs, make enough to raise the children comfortably. But the shipping companies, they control all the profitable routes. They gave me the dangerous ones, the ones through pirate territory or near unstable stars. The pay barely covered fuel and docking fees." Jake listened while replacing a burned-out power coupling. "So you've been running yourself ragged just to break even?" "Worse than breaking even. I've been going into debt. Every month a little more. I stopped maintaining the ship properly because I couldn't afford it. I told myself just one more run, one more job, then I'd get everything fixed." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I knew it was dangerous. I knew I was risking my children's lives. But what choice did I have?" That hit Jake hard. He thought about his own past, his own losses. "I lost my family 7 years ago," he said quietly. "Colony malfunction on Titan Station. Life support failed in the residential sector. By the time emergency crews arrived, everyone was gone. My wife Beth, my daughter Amy, both gone." Velsera looked up at him with understanding in her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "That's why I became a mechanic," Jake continued, tightening the last bolt on the coupling. "I couldn't save them because someone somewhere cut corners, didn't do their job right, didn't care enough to fix things properly. I promised myself I'd never be that person. Every ship I work on, I pretend my family is on board. Would I let them fly in this? If the answer is no, I don't stop working until the answer is yes." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 people from different worlds connected by loss and the determination to protect what remained. Jake climbed down and moved to the next system that needed attention. As he worked through the ship, he kept finding more problems. The life support system was running on backup protocols, the navigation computer had corrupted data that could have sent them into a star, the emergency escape pods hadn't been inspected in 5 years and probably wouldn't deploy if needed. Every time he found something new, he fixed it. He didn't ask Velsera's permission. He didn't add it to any official work order. He just did it because it needed doing. His supervisor Randy showed up on the second day looking annoyed. Miller, we need to talk. You've been pulling parts from station inventory without authorization. The antimatter containment modules alone cost $8,000 each, and you've used 3 of them. Jake didn't stop working. Put it on my account. I'll pay for it out of my salary. Your salary? Jake, that'll take you 6 months to pay off, and that's just the containment modules. What about the hyperdrive assembly? The hull repair nanites? The structural reinforcement beams? Then it takes 6 months. Or a year. I don't care. Randy ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. This isn't how business works. We have protocols, approval processes. You can't just decide to give away thousands of credits worth of parts because you feel bad for someone. Jake finally stopped and looked at his supervisor. Randy, that ship had fractures in the hull that would have torn it apart the moment they hit hyperspace. Those 3 kids would have died screaming in the vacuum of space. Their mother would have watched them die knowing she couldn't do anything to save them. So yeah, I'm giving away parts. Fire me if you want, but I'm finishing this job first. Randy stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Just try to use the cheaper alternatives when you can, okay? And for God's sake, fill out the paperwork properly so I can at least justify this to corporate. By the end of the second day, Jake was exhausted. He barely slept, living on coffee and determination. But the ship was coming together. The engines hummed with smooth power instead of the rattling death wheeze they'd had before. The hull integrity was at 98%. All the safety systems were online and functioning perfectly. Velsera found him in the cargo bay, doing a final check on the artificial gravity generators. Her children were with her, playing some kind of Valerian game that involved a lot of jumping. Jake, she said softly, I don't know how to thank you. This is more than anyone has ever done for us. More than I thought anyone would do. Jake smiled tiredly. Just promise me you'll keep up with the maintenance from now on. And maybe find some safer cargo routes. I promise. She hesitated, then continued. In Valerian culture we are taught that accepting charity is weakness. That a matriarch must be strong, must provide for her family without help from others. I've violated every social expectation my people have by accepting your help. Maybe those expectations are wrong, Jake said simply. Maybe asking for help when you need it is actually the strongest thing you can do. Especially when you have kids depending on you. The youngest child ran over and hugged Jake's leg, babbling something in Valerian. Velsera translated with a smile. She says you're her favorite human and wants to know if you'll come live on our ship. Jake laughed and ruffled the kid's head crest. Tell her I've got to stay here and fix other people's ships. But I'm honored. When it came time to present the final bill, Jake sat down with Velsera in the station's office. He'd spent the last hour carefully documenting everything, listing parts at exact cost with no markup, and putting his entire labor charge down as warranty work, even though the ship was decades past any warranty period. The final total came to 4,000 credits. Just barely more than Velsera had said she could pay. She looked at the itemized list and tears started flowing down her face. Not from stress this time but from pure gratitude. You've listed everything at cost. No labor charges. Jake, this should be 50,000 credits at least. Consider the rest an investment in keeping good people safe, Jake said. Velsera grabbed his hands in both of hers, nearly crushing his fingers with her strength. I need your full name. Your employee identification number. Everything. Please. Jake felt a flutter of worry. Maybe she was going to file a complaint about the low charges, get him in trouble with corporate for undercharging. But he wrote everything down anyway. She memorized every detail, then pulled him into a hug that squeezed the air from his lungs. I will never forget this. Never forget you. 3 days later, Jake stood in the observation deck and watched Velsera's ship depart, engines running smooth and clean, hull solid and safe. The kids waved at him through the viewport and he waved back. Tony came up beside him. You know you're going to be paying off those parts for the next year, right? Yeah, Jake said. Worth it though. He had no idea that everything he'd written down, every detail about himself, was about to change his life forever. 3 weeks passed, and Jake had almost forgotten about the whole incident with Velsera and her kids. Almost. He still thought about them sometimes, usually late at night when he was working on some broken-down freighter. He wondered if they'd made it to wherever they were going, if the kids were eating regularly now, if Velsera had found better cargo routes. Life at Station 7 had gone back to normal. Wake up, drink coffee, fix ships, go to sleep, repeat. Jake had started making payments on the parts he'd used, watching a chunk of each paycheck disappear to cover his generosity. He didn't regret it, but his apartment was going to stay pretty bare for a while. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Randy stuck his head into the maintenance bay where Jake was replacing a fuel injector on a small passenger shuttle. "Miller, my office." "Now." Jake's stomach dropped. That tone usually meant trouble. He wiped his hands on a rag and followed his supervisor, mentally preparing for bad news. Maybe corporate had finally noticed the unauthorized parts usage. Maybe they'd decided to fire him after all. When he entered Randy's office, his supervisor looked nervous, which was weird. Randy never got nervous. The man had worked for Stellar Mechanics Incorporated for 20 years and had seen everything. "Sit down, Jake," Randy said, gesturing to a chair. "We've got a hologram conference call coming through. From corporate headquarters." "Oh man," Jake muttered, sinking into the chair. "This is it. I'm fired. Just let them talk, okay?" A moment later, the hologram projector flickered to life, and suddenly Jake was looking at a well-dressed human man in his 50s, sitting in what appeared to be a very expensive office. The nameplate on his desk read Thomas Brennan, Regional Director. "Jake Miller?" the man asked, smiling warmly. Yes sir. That's me." "Excellent. I'll get straight to the point because I know you're a busy man. How would you feel about a promotion?" Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "A promotion. We're offering you the position of lead mechanic for Sector 9. That's 40 stations under your authority, including Station 7. You'd have full discretion over repair protocols, pricing structures, and staff training. The salary is 3 times what you're currently making, plus benefits and a performance bonus structure." Jake's brain had stopped working. He just stared at the hologram, mouth slightly open. Randy nudged him. "Say something, you idiot." Why?" Jake managed to get out. "I mean, I'm good at my job, but I'm not that good. And I kinda broke a bunch of rules a few weeks ago with unauthorized parts usage." Director Brennan chuckled. "Actually, that's exactly why we're offering you this position. A major stakeholder in the company specifically requested you by name. They reviewed your customer service metrics, your safety record, and your approach to client relations. They were extremely impressed." "A major stakeholder requested me? Who?" "I'm not at liberty to say. Privacy agreements and all that. But they have significant influence in the company, and when they make a recommendation this strong, we listen. So what do you say?" Jake looked at Randy, who shrugged. "Don't look at me. This is way above my pay grade." What else could he say? Yes. Yes, I accept." "Fantastic. You'll receive all the official documentation by the end of the day. Your new position starts Monday. Congratulations, Jake. I think you're going to do great things for this company." The hologram winked out, leaving Jake sitting in stunned silence. "Did that really just happen?" he asked Randy. His supervisor grinned. "Apparently. You lucky bastard." By Monday, Jake was drowning in new responsibilities. He had 40 stations to oversee, hundreds of mechanics working under him, and the authority to completely restructure how repairs were conducted across an entire sector of space. The first thing he did was terrify the bean counters at corporate by implementing a new pricing policy. Instead of the standard markup that Stellar Mechanics had always used, gouging customers for every credit possible, Jake introduced flexible pricing based on customer need. Standard rates for commercial vessels and wealthy clients, reduced rates for struggling independent operators, payment plans for families, and a hardship fund for emergency situations. "This is financial suicide," one accountant told him during a video conference. "We'll lose millions in revenue." "Or," Jake countered, "we'll gain something better. Customer loyalty. Repeat business. Word-of-mouth recommendations. People will come to our stations because they know they'll be treated fairly, not gouged." He also implemented mandatory safety protocols. Every mechanic under his authority had to complete additional training focused on identifying critical safety issues. The new rule was simple. If something could kill the passengers, it got fixed regardless of whether the customer initially requested it. They'd be informed and charged fairly, but safety wasn't negotiable. The most important change, though, was cultural. Jake started a program he called Ship as Home. He required every mechanic to spend 5 minutes talking to their customers, learning who was on board, where they were going, why the trip mattered. The goal was to make mechanics see ships not as machines but as homes, transport for real people with real lives. "Imagine your own family is on that ship," Jake told his mechanics during training sessions. "Would you let them fly with a patched fuel line? Would you skip the hull integrity check to save time? If the answer is no, then you fix it right or you don't let it leave the bay." The first month was rough. Jake got complaints from corporate about reduced profit margins. He got pushback from mechanics who thought he was making their jobs harder. He got angry messages from other sector leads who thought he was making them look bad. But then something interesting started happening. Customer satisfaction scores in Sector 9 began climbing. And not just climbing a little, skyrocketing. Clients who'd used stations in his sector started requesting them specifically, even if it meant traveling farther. Reviews on the galactic net praised the human approach to service, the feeling of being treated with dignity and respect rather than like a walking credit account. Repeat business increased by 40% in 2 months. New customers flooded in, drawn by recommendations from friends and colleagues. Even alien species who traditionally avoided human-run stations started showing up, curious about this new way of doing business. Jake found himself becoming something of a legend in the industry. Other mechanics across the galaxy started adopting his methods. What would Jake Miller do? Became a common question in repair bays from here to the outer rim. Through it all, Jake stayed humble. He still spent time in the maintenance bays at Station 7, still got his hands dirty fixing ships alongside his mechanics. He remembered where he came from and why he'd started doing this in the first place. One evening, about 6 months after the promotion, Jake was finishing up a repair on a small family transport when his communicator buzzed. It was an invitation to the annual Stellar Mechanics Incorporated Galaxy-wide conference, mandatory for all sector leads. Jake groaned. He hated corporate events. All those speeches and networking sessions and fake smiling. But it was mandatory, so he'd have to go. He had no idea that conference was going to turn his world upside down. As he locked up the maintenance bay and headed home, Jake thought again about Velsera and her children. He still wondered how they were doing. Still hoped they'd found a better life. What he didn't know was that Velsera thought about him every single day. Every report he filed, every protocol he implemented, every training document he created landed on her desk. She read them all, watching with pride as the human mechanic who'd shown her family kindness transformed an entire sector of her company. And now she'd decided it was time for them to meet again. Time for Jake to learn the truth about who he'd helped that night at Station 7. Time for him to understand just how much one act of kindness had changed, not just one family's life, but an entire corporation spanning hundreds of worlds. The conference was in 2 weeks. Jake marked it on his calendar with a sigh, completely unaware that his life was about to get very, very interesting. The corporate capital world of Nexus Prime was overwhelming. Jake had never seen so many beings from so many different species in one place. The conference center alone was bigger than most space stations, built to accommodate everything from tiny Pixari delegates who stood knee-high to humans, all the way up to the massive Valorians and Chromath who towered over everyone else. Jake felt completely out of his element. He was wearing his nicest clothes, which still looked shabby compared to the expensive suits and formal wear everyone else had on. Other sector leads walked around with confidence, networking and schmoozing like they'd been born doing it. Jake just wanted to find a corner and wait for this whole thing to be over. The opening ceremony was held in an auditorium that could seat 10,000 people. Jake found a seat way in the back, hoping to be invisible. The lights dimmed and a series of executives took the stage, each giving carefully prepared speeches about quarterly profits, expansion plans and corporate synergy. Jake's eyes glazed over. This was exactly as boring as he'd feared. Then the final speaker was announced. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests, please welcome the Chief Executive Officer and majority shareholder of Stellar Mechanics Incorporated, Matriarch Velsera Kethmoran. Jake's coffee cup slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Walking onto the stage in elegant executive robes, flanked by corporate security, was the exhausted Valerian mother he'd helped 6 months ago. Except she didn't look exhausted anymore. She looked powerful, confident, every inch the leader of a galaxy-spanning corporation. Her scales gleamed with that vibrant purple he'd only glimpsed before. Her 3 children sat in the front row, wearing formal clothing and looking proud. Jake's mind was spinning. The struggling cargo hauler was the CEO? The woman who couldn't afford repairs owned the entire company? Nothing made sense. Velsera's voice boomed through the auditorium, her translator working perfectly now. Thank you all for coming. Today I want to talk about the future of our company, and how we're going to transform the way we do business across the galaxy. She clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the massive screen behind her. The title read Human-Centric Service Protocols, Putting People Before Profits. For too long, Velsera continued, our company has focused purely on maximizing revenue. We've charged the highest prices the market would bear. We've rushed jobs to process more customers. We've treated our clients as transaction numbers rather than living beings with families, hopes, and fears. This approach has made us wealthy, but it's also made us despised. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some executives looked uncomfortable. 6 months ago, I conducted an experiment. I traveled in disguise to one of our remote stations to see firsthand how our employees treated customers. What I found was eye-opening. Jake sank lower in his seat, a horrible feeling growing in his stomach. My ship suffered genuine critical failure. My children and I were genuinely stranded, genuinely broke. We had given most of our resources to a charitable convoy that had been attacked by pirates. It wasn't planned, but it became the most valuable research I've ever conducted. The screen changed to show data charts and customer satisfaction metrics. At that station, I met a mechanic who changed everything. He didn't see a transaction. He saw a frightened family. Before he even looked at my ship, he fed my hungry children. He gave them a safe place to rest. He showed kindness without any expectation of reward or recognition. Jake wanted to disappear. People around him were starting to look around, wondering who she was talking about. This mechanic found that my ship should have killed us. Critical safety failures that I'd ignored because I couldn't afford repairs. But instead of just telling me the cost and turning me away, he fixed everything. He used parts he couldn't afford, worked for 2 days straight, and charged me barely enough to cover materials. He did this not knowing who I was, expecting nothing in return. Velsera paused, letting her words sink in. That mechanic showed me what our company should be. What it could be. So I promoted him to lead mechanic of an entire sector and gave him authority to implement his philosophy across 40 stations. Oh no. Oh no no no. The results have been extraordinary. Customer satisfaction in Sector 9 has increased by 340%. Repeat business is up 40%. Word-of-mouth recommendations have brought us more new clients than any advertising campaign ever did. And all because one human mechanic understood a simple truth. Treating people with dignity and respect is not just morally right, it's good business. The screen changed again, this time showing Jake's employee photo. That mechanic is here with us today. Jake Miller, would you please stand up? Every head in the auditorium turned, scanning the crowd. Jake felt like his legs had turned to concrete. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. A spotlight found him in the back row, and suddenly 10,000 pairs of eyes were staring at him. There he is, Velsera said warmly. Jake, please don't be embarrassed. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you did everything right. Slowly, mechanically, Jake stood up. The auditorium erupted in applause. He had no idea what to do with his hands. Come down here, please, Velsera called. I'd like everyone to meet you properly. The walk down to the stage was the longest of Jake's life. His face burned with embarrassment. Other sector leads patted him on the back as he passed. Some looked impressed, others jealous, a few seemed angry that he'd made them look bad. When he finally reached the stage, Velsera placed a massive hand on his shoulder. Up close, he could see her children in the front row. The youngest one waved at him enthusiastically. Jake Miller, Velsera announced to the crowd, is the reason we're all here today. His approach to customer service, his commitment to safety over profit, his ability to see people rather than transactions, this is what Stellar Mechanics Incorporated will become. Starting today, his protocols are being implemented company-wide across all sectors. More applause. Jake managed a weak smile and a small wave. He felt like he might throw up. After what felt like an eternity, the ceremony ended. Velsera requested that all sector leads meet her for a smaller briefing session. Jake found himself herded into a conference room with about 200 other executives. Velsera told the full story there, leaving nothing out. How she'd been completing a traditional Valerian journey of hardship with her children, teaching them humility and the value of struggle. How the ship failure hadn't been planned but had become an invaluable lesson. How Jake's kindness without knowing her identity had shown her the kind of person she needed leading her company's transformation. After the briefing, she pulled Jake aside for a private conversation. I imagine you have questions, she said gently. A few thousand, yeah, Jake managed. Why didn't you tell me? Why the whole disguise thing? Because I needed to see who you really were. If you'd known I was the CEO, you might have treated me differently. You might have tried to impress me or acted out of career ambition rather than genuine compassion. I needed to know your character when nothing was at stake, when there was no benefit to being kind. Jake ran his hand through his hair. I feel like an idiot. I charged the CEO 4,000 credits for 50,000 credits worth of work. Velsera laughed. And that's exactly why you're perfect for what comes next. Jake, I want to offer you a new position. Vice President of Customer Relations and Service Standards. You'll have the authority to reshape how this entire company interacts with every customer on every world we operate on. I'm just a mechanic, Jake protested. I don't know anything about being an executive. I'm not asking you to stop being a mechanic. I'm asking you to teach everyone else in this company to think like one. To see every ship as someone's lifeline, every customer as someone's family. Can you do that? Jake looked out the window at the sprawling city below, then back at Valsera. He thought about all the families out there, all the people who just needed someone to treat them fairly and keep them safe. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I can do that. The first year as vice president was the hardest thing Jake had ever done. Fixing ships was easy compared to changing the entire culture of a galaxy-spanning corporation. He had thousands of employees who'd been doing things the same way for decades, and they didn't appreciate some mechanic from nowhere telling them they needed to change. The resistance started immediately. Senior executives who'd built their careers on profit margins sent him angry messages. Station managers complained that his policies were cutting into their bonuses. Some mechanics thought he was making their jobs unnecessarily complicated. But Jake had Valsera's full support, and that made all the difference. When a regional vice president tried to block the implementation of safety-first protocols in his sector, Valsera personally flew out there and replaced him. Word spread quickly after that. The new policies weren't suggestions. They were the future of the company. Jake spent months traveling from station to station, training sessions with mechanics, managers, and customer service staff. He didn't give PowerPoint presentations or corporate speeches. Instead, he told stories. Real stories about real people. He told them about Valsera and her children, about how they'd been hours away from catastrophic engine failure. He told them about the colony on Titan Station and why he became a mechanic in the first place. He told them about the elderly Centauri couple he'd helped last month, whose life savings were tied up in their small transport ship, and how a fair price on repairs had meant they could keep working instead of becoming destitute. Every ship that comes into your bay is carrying someone's whole world, Jake would tell the mechanics. Maybe it's their business, their home, their only way to reach medical treatment, their chance to see family they haven't seen in years. When you cut corners or overcharge or rush through a job, you're not just affecting a machine. You're affecting lives. Slowly things began to change. Customer satisfaction scores climbed across the board. The angry reviews that had plagued stellar mechanics for years started getting replaced with glowing recommendations. Alien species who'd avoided human-run stations for decades started coming back, curious about this new approach. The financial analysts at corporate were shocked when the quarterly reports came in. Despite reducing prices and offering payment plans, revenue was actually up. Way up. The increase in customer volume more than made up for the reduced per-transaction profit. Turns out when you treat people fairly, they come back and bring their friends. Other corporations started trying to copy the approach, but it never quite worked for them. They'd implement similar policies but without the genuine commitment behind them. Customers could tell the difference between a company that actually cared and one that was just following a trend. Jake's favorite part of the job was still the field work. Despite his fancy new title and the executive office at corporate headquarters that he barely used, he made sure to spend at least 1 week each month working in a maintenance bay somewhere. He'd show up unannounced at a random station, put on coveralls and work alongside the regular mechanics. This drove his security detail crazy, but Jake insisted. I can't teach people to be good mechanics if I forget how to be one myself, he'd tell them. It was during one of these visits, about 2 years into his new role, that Jake met a young mechanic named Danny Rodriguez. The kid was fresh out of technical school, barely 20 years old, working his first real job at Station 7. The same station where Jake had started, where everything had changed. Jake was observing Danny work on a small family transport when he noticed the kid hesitating. The ship belonged to a single mother with 2 young kids, and there was a problem with the shield generators that would be expensive to fix. Danny kept looking at the cost estimate on his tablet, then at the family in the waiting area, then back at the tablet. Jake could see the internal struggle playing out on the kid's face. Finally, Danny approached the woman. Ma'am, I found an issue with your shield generators. They're not going to fail immediately, but they're degraded enough that I wouldn't feel safe letting my own family fly with them. The repair is going to cost about 3,000 credits. The woman's face fell. I don't have that much. I was already stretching my budget for the engine tune-up. Danny glanced back at Jake, not knowing who he was, just seeing another mechanic in coveralls. Jake gave him a small nod of encouragement. Okay, Danny said, taking a deep breath. Here's what we're going to do. I can set you up on a payment plan, 200 credits a month. And I'm going to mark this as a critical safety repair, which means I can source refurbished parts instead of new ones. That'll cut the cost in half. Total will be 1,500, paid over 8 months. Does that work? Relief washed over the woman's face. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, Jake approached Danny. That was good thinking with the payment plan and refurbished parts. Danny shrugged, still not recognizing him. Just following the protocols. Safety first, treat every customer fairly, find solutions instead of just quoting problems. That's what Jake Miller teaches, right? Jake smiled. Yeah, that's what he teaches. I'm Jake, by the way. Danny's eyes went wide. Oh no. Oh man. I wasn't trying to. You were watching me the whole time? Relax, kid. You did great. That's exactly what you should have done. I'm proud of you. Danny looked like he might pass out from relief. That evening, Jake was doing a final inspection in the bay when he heard familiar voices. Velsera and her children had come to visit the station. The kids were bigger now, more confident, but they still lit up when they saw Jake. The youngest one, who was now almost as tall as Jake, ran over and hugged him. Uncle Jake. Mom said you were here. They'd started calling him that about a year ago. Jake didn't mind. In a way, they were family. Velsera had become not just his boss but one of his closest friends. They had dinner together at least once a month, talking about everything from company strategy to their favorite Earth movies. How's the ship running? Jake asked Velsera. Perfectly. Just like you fixed it. I'm almost disappointed there's nothing wrong, so I don't have an excuse to come get it serviced more often. They walked through the station together, Velsera pointing out how much had changed since that night 2 years ago. The facility had been completely upgraded. New equipment, expanded bays, a proper family waiting area with food and entertainment. Station 7 had become the flagship location for stellar mechanics, the standard all other stations tried to meet. You know, Velsera said quietly, my people have a saying. The ripples from one stone can cross an ocean. I think about that a lot when I see what you've built here. I didn't build it alone, Jake said. You gave me the opportunity. And people like Danny, they're the ones actually doing the work every day. But you showed them how. You showed all of us how. She paused, watching her children play in the observation deck. In Valerian culture we have another tradition. When someone saves your life they become part of your family. You saved my children's lives that night, Jake. You're family now whether you like it or not. Jake felt his throat tighten. I like it. I like it a lot. 5 years after that night, when a broken-down ship had limped into Bay 3, Jake found himself back at Station 7 for a special occasion. The company was dedicating the newly renovated facility and naming it the Jake Miller Service Excellence Center. Jake had tried to talk them out of it, but Velsera insisted. People need to know what we stand for. Your name represents everything this company has become. During the dedication ceremony, Jake gave a speech to the assembled mechanics, managers, and customers. He talked about the journey from that scared moment when he thought he'd be fired for using unauthorized parts, to standing here now as a VP who'd helped transform an entire industry. But mostly he talked about the mechanic he'd just watched in Bay 3. Young Danny Rodriguez, patiently explaining a repair to a nervous alien family, taking the time to make sure they understood and felt comfortable, finding ways to make the necessary work affordable. That's the human way, Jake said. Not because humans are perfect. We're not. But at our best we see each other. We care about each other. We understand that every person we meet is fighting their own battle, carrying their own burdens, trying their best to take care of the people they love. He looked at Velsera, standing with her children in the front row. A wise Valerian once taught me that the ripples from one stone can cross an ocean. One act of kindness, one decision to do the right thing even when it's hard, that can change everything. Not just for one person but for thousands. Millions. So my challenge to everyone here is simple. Be that stone. Make those ripples. Treat every ship like it's carrying your own family. Because in a way it is. We're all out here together trying to get home safely. And if we can help each other do that, well, that's a pretty good way to spend a life. The crowd applauded, but Jake barely heard it. He was watching Danny work through the window, seeing himself 2 years ago, seeing every mechanic who'd ever chosen to do the right thing over the easy thing. Later that night, after the ceremony ended and most people had left, Jake sat in the break room with Velsera and her children. The same room where he'd fed 3 frightened alien kids and promised their mother that everything would be okay. Do you ever regret it? Velsera asked. You could have just done the minimum repair, collected your standard fee, gone home. You'd still be a regular mechanic with a simple life. Jake thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Not even for a second. This right here, all of this, it matters. We're keeping people safe. We're treating them with dignity. We're proving that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. How could I regret that? The youngest child, now almost adult-sized, yawned and leaned against Jake's shoulder. Tell us the story again. About the night we met. So Jake did. He told them about the smoking ship, the scared children, the decision to fix everything right regardless of cost. He told it the way he'd told it hundreds of times to mechanics across the galaxy, never getting tired of it because it reminded him why he did what he did. Outside the window, ships came and went, each one carrying someone's hopes, someone's dreams, someone's family. And in bays across the station, mechanics worked with care and pride, knowing that their work mattered, that they weren't just fixing machines but keeping people safe. That was the human way. And it had changed the galaxy one repair at a time.